Hello and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben and with me this week is...
Brad Pitt, the man, the myth, the legend. Wait, no, I'm not. I'm just Jim.
Just Jim. No, you know what? You're not just Jim. You're Jim.
I tell you what, this movie makes you want to be Brad Pitt. Because this week we watched F1 and is it F1 or is it F1 the movie? I think it depends on your region, but
the title of the movie is F1, but it was marketed as F1 the movie.
Yeah, which is, look, I am not wild about the title because I think it's just kind of weirdly generic, but I am pretty thrilled with the film itself. So why don't you give us a quick synopsis and a few facts about the film, and then we can dive in.
Will do. F1 centers on Sonny Hayes, Brad Pitt, a once promising Formula One driver whose career was cut short decades earlier by a devastating crash. Now a drifting, semi-retired racer for hire, Sonny is recruited by an old friend to help save a struggling F1 team on the brink of collapse. Brought in as a mentor for a talented but headstrong rookie, Sonny quickly realizes the job isn't just about guidance, but his own instincts, ego, and unfinished business. As the season unfolds, Sonny experiences generational clashes, the brutal politics of modern F1, and the physical and psychological cost of racing to the limit. With Sonny forced to confront whether redemption comes from winning again or just letting go.
Can't it be both? Because it's Hollywood. So
spoilers. Turns out it is.
Give us a few behind-the-scenes production details about this one.
Directed by Joseph Kosinski, screenplay by Aaron Kruger, cinematography by Claudio Miranda, starring Brad Pitt, Damson Idris, Kenny Condon, Tobias Menzies, and Javier Bardem. Music by Hans Zimmer, runtime of 155 minutes, budget of between 200 and 300 million. Its box office was 191 million domestic, international was 443 million, giving it a worldwide box office of $633,142,436. I liked this movie. I liked this movie for a couple of reasons. This movie is not... it's an okay plot, but this movie is a spectacle. This movie is what kind of movies kind of used to be for a while, was you went to see something you couldn't see somewhere else. And
you know
they
what
deliver.
You know what this film reminded me of, basically from its opening frames. Look, when I say reminded me of, I could point to about 18 things.
Yeah.
So the obvious comparison, I suppose, is Top Gun Maverick, of course. And there's a huge amount of Top Gun Maverick's DNA in this movie. And even if you look at the behind-the-scenes crew, they are very, very similar. They used very, very similar techniques. But beyond that obvious comparison, this movie really reminded me of the 1990s spec script boom, where it was before it was existing IP and it was superheroes and it was, let's adapt that thing that already exists. This really reminded me of, hey, we've got a film about a particular subculture or sporting event or, unique kind of SWAT team that exists out there in the world. Let's make a movie about it. And then they put all the money and resources behind it. And I think why it stands out now is because it's a huge throwback is what it feels like now. It doesn't feel like we get this type of film anymore, because it's all sort of gone much, I guess, safer with regard to existing IP and that kind of thing. Now, there's a number of reasons why this film is still, not necessarily safe. There's a huge amount of trying to put as many sure thing bets in it as possible from a studio perspective. But still, like the type of film that it is, it really reminded me of that. So, by the way, if you hadn't... we have talked about it before, but a long time ago now on our podcast, the spec script boom was this idea that you could come up with an original idea for particularly a big budget sort of action type movie like this, and you could submit that, and then that might get made. And in fact, they were sought after by studios. Studios don't do that anymore. It was huge in the late 80s and early 90s, well, right through the 90s, really, where studios wanted that type of film. And we got films like Armageddon or Days of Thunder or the original Top Gun, or, all of these sorts of movies that The Rock, like heaps of movies, tons of movies. That was mainly what they were making. And then they don't do that now. Now they go with something that has an existing built-in fan base or intellectual property, and they often don't even start with a script, and they just sort of say, let's sort of go with that.
It's like the difference, just quietly, it's like the difference between like a gold prospector going out into the mountains and trying to strike an ore vein versus like a satellite scanning down and going, we know where the ore veins are, we're just going to keep mining those.
Exactly. So this feels, while the plot, and I'm sure we will get to the plot, is not particularly, I guess, original, if you like, the fact that this style of movie is being made is somewhat original. There's a bit of irony there that the plot is incredibly generic, while at the same time going, haven't seen one of these for a while, so therefore it feels really unique, and it's that kind of odd paradox.
The timing of this movie is actually bordering on genius as well. So the culture around Formula One, I'm not a Formula One person, I'm not a race car person, but I know the culture around Formula One is at its highest that it's been in maybe ever. With things like Drive to Survive on Netflix, with social media, with big money spectacle races all around the world, with drivers who are now a lot more personality than they are driver in some circumstances. And then this movie is kind of almost the cherry on top, the capitalization of this movement of Formula One. I know so many people now I work with that you talk to that you would never have guessed they follow Formula One, but because of something external to Formula One, like Drive to Survive or something, has drawn them into the sport, they now have favorite drivers. They now have these stories that they like to follow, and this is that distilled, and I think it's distilled very well. It's very clever.
Absolutely. And that was sort of what I was one of the things I was referring to when I say, look, it might not be an existing intellectual property, but it's very savvy in the sense that Formula One is, I mean, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I've sort of seen and heard the same things. I think it's one of the fastest growing sport fandoms in the world, right now. Like more and more people constantly coming on and getting into Formula One. It's very much booming at the moment. So yeah, sure, we might not be saying it's based on a novel or it's based on something like that, but it is, built around an existing fandom. I think what is maybe interesting is the reaction of that fandom to this movie, because this movie is pure Hollywood in the way it is constructed. I don't follow Formula One either, but I do know movies and I know sort of sport generally. I doubt that the commentators who are, commentating on the race are commenting on exact team strategy that they're talking about to their drivers in the pits. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's how it works in Formula One, but I'm like, what? I'm sorry, you're revealing team strategy to everybody on the broadcast as it happens? That doesn't sound right.
So there's a bit more in Formula One than there is in some other sports, for example, but you're right, it's egregious in this movie because they're explaining it to people who may not understand Formula One.
Yes, they're explaining it to me. They're explaining it to me, but it's that
they're effectively
thing of
narrators.
They are. They're narrating. They're not just commenting, but they're narrating. Like I say, they're going deep into what is really, hopefully, in the real sport, private conversations between the drivers and the people in the pit lane and stuff like that. So I don't follow Formula One, but even to me, that felt. I'm like, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't look real.
I know in broadcast there is comms to drivers and stuff that is broadcast, but I would assume that is not live broadcast. That is like put through after events and things like that. So yes.
There you go. So, but look, ultimately, this movie I really did enjoy. I really liked the way it was shot. I think it's a really, just to use an old world phrase, it's a handsome looking movie. This is a slick looking production, and it's got that Joseph Kosinski sort of special sleekness to it, and you can kind of see that in his films. Um, if you look at Tron Legacy, if you look at
Yeah.
Oblivion, if you look at Top Gun Maverick, and now you look at F1, you can tell they're all by the same director, and that director loves to shoot a beautiful, big, clean looking picture. And I really like that. I think it's got a nice style and a nice look to the whole thing. It feels like big budget Hollywood. And, sometimes these movies don't. So it's nice
And
that it does.
it's obviously in collaboration with his cinematographer, Claudio Miranda, who is partnered on multiple of those projects with him. So they've obviously developed their language together, both visually and storytelling wise. And it really shows in a movie like this. And we'll reference it a few more times because it is the most easy way to explain it. It is Top Gun Maverick, right? So Top Gun Maverick has that kind of thesis of, we're putting you in the cockpit. We want you to know what it feels like to be in a fighter jet, right? This is what the thesis of this film is, effectively. We want you to feel like you're in the action, you're in the F1 car, you're in the crashes, you're in all this sort of stuff. Like, if this was like a 3D experience at a theme park, it'd be mind-blowing. But the action, so I've slowed down. What I found myself multiple times doing watching this movie is I felt low to the ground. F1 cars are low to the ground. And I had this feeling and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I felt low to the ground. And that's a weird thing to think about when you're watching a movie. But the way they shot it and the way they got the action done, and I saw a little behind the scenes, the way they placed cameras on cars and things like that, it really did feel visceral. I felt positioned lower than I was watching the film. And I don't know how to explain how that makes you feel watching a movie, but it's immersive is what it is. It's immersive.
It's actually one of the few movies that when I watched it, I actually lamented that I wasn't seeing it for the first time on a giant cinema
Yeah.
screen, preferably in IMAX or something like that. Because even on my home television set, I was like, man, this one's built for the movies. This one's really built for theatrical, and it would have been pretty incredible to see. If they ever do a re-release, it's
Yeah.
actually something I would consider going, I should go see that, even though I've already seen that movie, because that would be an amazing cinema experience. And it's for all the reasons that you're saying, hard mounting the cameras to the cars, getting inside that cockpit of the F1 car, and really feeling it. And of course, the sound mix is really great for that as well, as is the score. So that's all coming together really, really nicely. I think as well, they've really realized that the Top Gun approach to visual effects is the way to go here.
Yes.
And it's still weird to me that this works so well, but a lot of the time, by the time it gets to our eyeballs, what we're seeing is almost entirely CGI.
Yeah.
However, it's also almost entirely been painted onto something real, which is why it looks so good. It's the idea that the entire car that is driving, it's actually there, it's in the frame, but it doesn't look the same as the version of the car that we're seeing. They're reskinning it with computer graphics, but they have the perfect reference because the vehicle was actually there and actually driving. So it's just this crazy thing where you go to all this effort to do it for real, so that your visual effects component looks as convincing as possible. And it works, but it's still just a mind boggle to me that we go to this effort, we shoot it live and we shoot it real, and we actually have things in the frame, and then we reskin it digitally, so we're not seeing much of that real frame anymore.
You're shooting a movie to shoot a movie.
Yeah,
it's a conundrum, but it is the approach for this.
It works. It works.
For something that is so dependent on its vehicle. It is so dependent on its thing, like a race car or a fighter jet or whatever. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's definitely the right approach, and there are very few moments in the movie, even for the trained eye, where you are pulled out of the movie because you go, "Oh, that's a visual effect." You know, most of the time, it's fairly immersive in the way that you are actually feeling like you're there and you're in the story and you're with the characters. So, I really thought that the visual effects were done very, very well, and I like this approach. We should say as well, look, it's the same approach as Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah.
Jets and cars are hard surface vehicles, which are the things that CGI does the best, and it does it even better if you have actual reference footage of that thing, which they had in both of these cases and went out and shot in both of these cases, which makes it look even better. So
I haven't looked this up, but I would bet I'm 100% correct. The unprecedented access these people had to F1 is bonkers to me. So, like, I know for a fact that filming on those racetracks is really difficult. People get denied it all the time unless it's part of an official event. They got so much footage of all these official tracks. They had drivers, they had teams, they had facilities. And look, I'm guessing they've mocked those facilities up to make them look a little bit fancier than they even are in real life. But like, F1 is sci-fi in real life. Like, it really is. Like, I reckon F1 is the closest we get to kind of like to consumable sci-fi on our planet, because the way they show it in the film, design cars, test cars, drive cars. I mean, this is pod racing. Like, like the reaction times and the thinking speeds and all those sort of things they have to do, like, is bonkers. And this film does such a great job of presenting that. So much so that I've heard some people mumble about it, but I actually think it's really deserving based on what I've just watched. It's had several Oscar nominations this year. And they make sense when you see what they are. Best sound, best editing, best visual effects, and best picture. So best picture is maybe the stretch for some people when it comes to this sort of movie. But like, this movie was made, this movie's the best version of, I think, this that can be made, like, of this movie at this point in time. It has fantastic sound. It has brilliant, I mean, brilliant editing. And the visual effects we've just spoken about. Those are like three components of a film that pretty much make up an entire movie. How is that not a Best Picture nomination then?
yeah, it's tough because it feels wrong, doesn't it, to be like, oh well, the story's it's a little generic, it's a little, but at the same time, I'm like, just because you know what it is, that doesn't mean it's bad, right? It just means you know what it is. Like in a lot of ways, Avatar does the same thing every time they make a movie. We know exactly what these are. But they're still incredibly entertaining to watch. So, yeah, in a way, I'm a bit like, it's a populist pick, but I don't really have a problem saying that it could be a best picture. And people are going to be really cranky that I said that, but I'm like, you know what? Give the people what they want.
I'm
And like,
I'm
this is
100% with you. I've been thinking about it since watching this movie. Best picture to me doesn't mean most original, doesn't mean necessarily the best acted. It means the best total experience. It's the best picture. It's the best piece of its type of art in this period of time. I don't know any other movie on that list that is a spectacle like this movie. It has the sound design of this movie. Yes, the acting is to its genre, and yes, the script and the story is to its genre, but like, that doesn't make this not a fantastic movie. It doesn't
yeah.
make this not an award-worthy movie. Will it win? I don't think it deserves to win,
Yeah.
but it deserves to be nominated.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So, the other thing is, so let's talk a little bit then about the genre of it, because um, this movie has a lot of things we've seen before. It's got kind of every cliche, if you like, thrown into it. But once again, I'm of the opinion that that doesn't make it bad. It just makes it known in terms of what we're doing, because I think it does all of those things very well. Brad Pitt is the washed up, older kind of hero who is getting called back in. And he is then, having to help this team and go through, and he's the experience on the team. He's the one who's got the radical ideas. He's the literal maverick, if you like, who's coming in and shaking things up, shaking this world up, and he's turning it on its head, and he's getting good results and ultimately leading them to victory, while at the same time he is putting to bed some personal demons of his own from his past. So we've got Damson Idris playing the cocky young up and coming racer who's got a lot to learn, particularly about humility. I'm like, well, we've seen that character before. As soon as Tobias Menzies appears, it's not a spoiler to say he's the antagonist. It's played as a bit of a late stage reveal, but I'm like, okay, you're the antagonist. Don't worry, we know. It's coming.
He's a Baratheon, yeah?
He is. I don't know about Baratheon. He's definitely a Game of Thrones person. So yeah. But and then Kerry Condon, who is there as both a teammate but also the love interest to Brad Pitt's character. So we've seen all of these characters. We kind of know how this is going to go. It's the getting there that is the interesting part, and I do think it's interesting. It's interesting in the way that they've put that together and the way that they've talked us through the way these races work, particularly for those of us who have no idea. And I do see that that's where the F1 enthusiasts got upset, because apparently it's not all that much about the way F1 movies work. F1 in real life works. Look, to me, as a layperson who doesn't actually follow that particular motorsport, I'm like, seems like it's all about tires. Is it all about tires?
Tires are very important.
There's a lot of tire talk in this movie. It's like, you got the right kind of tires. You're going to change now. You're going to change later. I'm like, okay, it's a tire game. It's a
tires game. And wings. Tires and wings.
So that's what I took away from it. So if you're an F1 person, you can angrily comment and say why that's all garbage. But that's what I took away. Yeah, educators, exactly. But again, I liked all that, and just the fact that it's stuff we've seen before. If you execute it well enough, which I think they do, and particularly Brad Pitt is so important here. Like, you must have a leading man with swagger, with charm, with experience, who knows how to do this type of story, and he has all of that.
I think there's two people that can do this movie. One of them's Brad Pitt. The other one's Tom Cruise.
The last one's left,
and because A, the right age, and B, just the kind of gravitas. I want to quickly talk about the romance subplot in this movie. And I want to talk about how I kind of respect it. Sometimes it feels a little over the top or tacked on or anything like that. It felt rather natural in this movie, and that's because of the two characters it was between. The two characters never betrayed what they were as characters to make this love story happen. You had a very independent, very kind of assertive, knows exactly who she is, woman who is the top of her field. And you have Brad Pitt, who is this kind of journeyman, almost like, in a strange way, a circus performer. He has that kind of vibe to him, right? Like, he's like the guy who goes from place to place, and they both...
He's a cowboy is what he is, and we'll get to that.
Yeah. He's a cowboy, you're exactly right. And they never betray their character to have the relationship that they have. And when the relationship ends, it ends in a way that is honest to both their characters again. Not in a great fiery heap, not in conflict, but in kind of like, oh, we knew both kind of what this was. And I just want to say, it didn't overwhelm the film. It didn't insert itself when it wasn't needed. I just felt like it kind of worked. And I think it's important to point out those things, because a lot of times the love story is put in and you really feel like it's put in because the studio goes, well, we need a love story. It didn't feel that way to me in this movie, even if it was that.
I also quite liked that, and you were alluding to this, but I'll just sort of say it in my words, which is that they didn't have a giant conflict that occurred towards the end of Act 2 between them as in their personal lives.
Yeah.
What that love story does in this movie is it reveals and creates intimacy between the characters, and it allows for conversations to then take place between
Creates
the characters for the audience, right? It's basically revealing plot through character, and that is a really good use of a love story plot in this kind of movie, because the trap is it overwhelms, and they have some sort of conflict, or he's out on the track and she's worried about him and makes a different judgment call than she would. They don't do any of that. And I'm so happy they didn't, because this movie is not about the love story. The love story is one small part of a bigger picture, and it exists in a certain particular place in the film, and it doesn't overwhelm. And I really liked that as well. One thing I was less keen on was the very clear Western tropes, and the idea that Brad Pitt is a modern day cowboy. Now, look, I get it, right? That is deliberate. That is, woven into the film, but it's also kind of a bit silly. So, if you're not familiar,
I just want to say it got its silliest at the end.
And that's really what I want to talk about, because now I know you're familiar, Ben, but in case people aren't, what I'm really talking about here is a particular story trope, right? So in Western movies that are Westerns, I say that Brad Pitt is the modern day cowboy here, because what happens is the townsfolk, right, need a hero. And the cowboy rides in, okay? He's a grifter. He's got a backstory, and he's just roving the plains.
He's not the hero they want.
He's not the hero they want, but he's the hero they need. And he rides in, and whatever problem the townsfolk are facing, this hero, he gets out his 6-shooters, and he, doesn't play by the rules, but he gets them where they need to be by the end of the movie. And then he tips his hat, his Stetson hat, and he rides off into the sunset to help the next village, right? Or the next town. And that's what the Western trope is. And
to be fair, I just want to say before we finish, there's actually another version of that ending, and that's death.
Yeah.
The gunslinger dies in service of the town, which this movie could have shaped up to be partway through.
Yeah, but no one wants that.
No.
So not in this movie anyway.
No.
So look, those bones are there in this film. Yes, sure, the F1 team is in trouble. Brad Pitt is a grifter. He's drifting through life.
He's a maverick, if you will.
He's living in his van, right? He's not the hero that they want, but he's the hero that they need. He comes in, he shakes it up, right? It's the same story. But at the end, it just gets absurd, particularly because, him leaving right when they celebrate, this is true to the Western genre, but it makes no sense for this particular film. He literally has nowhere else he has to be. And there's no reason that he can't enjoy the friendships and the celebrations for a little bit longer. And then leave sort of a couple of days after. But instead it's like, I'm going, I got somewhere to be. It's like, no, you don't. You literally don't.
Don't you remember that flyer from the start of the film? That's where he's going to be.
It's just crazy. And then of course he goes from the F1 world into a completely different style of racing, because what he does is drive, and it doesn't matter the car and it doesn't matter the circumstance. He's just, lightning in a bottle behind the wheel. And I'm just like,
in a lesser film, it would have felt like a ham-fisted way to set up a sequel.
Well, it almost feels that way here. The difference is I didn't mind it as much. I was smiling through all of that instead of shaking my head. Well, actually, I was smiling and shaking my head, but I was doing it, with fun. There was fun there, and that's because I had just had a really good time for the rest of the film, and I was like, okay, you get to do this silliness here at the end of the movie. I'm gonna give you. You have my goodwill. It's built up enough that you can do 10 minutes of this, right? This nonsense here at the end of the movie, because
Have you
I've
ever
just
driven
had,
Baja before?
you know, so I'm a little bit like, you know what, whatever. It's fine. It's fine. I
It
understand
felt
what you're
almost like
doing.
a Fast and the Furious tag.
It was
Like,
very, very fast and the furious in that sense. So, and again, in a way, they'd earned that because we'd had such a nice time for the rest of the film. But yes, it did have me going, oh, wow, we're really leaning into this, aren't we?
we haven't spoken about one of the largest puzzle pieces of this film, and that is the character of Joshua Pierce, played by Damson Idris. I think, unfortunately, due to the story of this film and the tropes it goes into, his character is obviously kind of the hardest to like for the vast majority of the film, and that is in no part to the acting. I think the acting is actually very good, and that's why it works so well. Because in any sport, in any kind of modern organization, you know the young cocky rookie who's really wants people to look at him a certain way and think of him as a certain way, and he's not a leader, he's all these sort of things. I thought he was really, really good in this film, like really good. And I think it just gets a bit overshadowed by the character he's playing. And just that moment at the end, just before the last race, where he comes in and he's early for the first time in the whole entire film, and everyone's kind of looking at him like, oh my gosh, he's going to make setup difficult or whatever, and he just holds the socks out, and he wants to take them for the same run that Sonny Hayes has been taking them for all film, and it kind of that connecting moment. I think that moment wouldn't work unless he'd just been so horrible the whole rest of the film. And it was just such a nice little click. And it's cliche and it's sappy and it's all those things. But I really did like it. And I do really want to point out his acting in this film because, as I said, it's very easy to be overshadowed by Brad Pitt in the spectacle of this film. And I don't think he was.
Yeah, and I think as a younger actor as well, it's also very difficult to play that character with the charisma required to
Yeah.
turn the audience around. Once you're in a bit more of an established career, the audience knows who you are, you get that by default. You don't
You
have
get
to
leeway.
do so much, right? Because the audience already reads that in for you. But if you don't know who this person is, and if it's a younger actor, which in this case, both of those things are true, they've got to work harder. They've got to be a lot more clever with their acting choices, even early in the film when they're being more antagonistic, to give you those moments of doubt, to give you those moments of, oh, maybe he's not sure about his approach and maybe he's, having second thoughts and that kind of thing. That's all got to be done early on so that when the pivot happens later, it actually works. And that's a combination. That's performance. It's
Do you
also
know what I think the
direction,
most...
letting the
Yeah.
film breathe and letting the camera sit on him for those reactions and for those moments to help build some level of goodwill with the audience, even when he's in that antagonistic mode early in the movie.
I thought the cleverest part of that in general was, I don't know whether it was directed or whether it was character work by the actor, but the smile. The plastered on huge smile when he's getting photos and things like that, and how it would just hang a little after it was all done. And you could see him literally turning it on and off. The smile was such a huge conscious choice. It wasn't natural. And I think that worked to kind of build in a little bit of the sympathy before we even knew we were meant to feel it. Because it's like, wait, this is a performance. He's uncomfortable. This isn't natural. This isn't him. And that's, I think, helps that turn at the end as well.
It's also, it does get a little bit confused when you look at their relationship as well, because at the start of the film, it's Sonny who is not being a team player, right? And you could say he has reasons for that, but he doesn't explain those reasons, right? So it's a little bit unfair to the rest of the team, and particularly to Damson's character, because Sonny doesn't let them in on what he's doing. So therefore, they just think he's not being a team player. Well, that is on Sonny then, because he's created that antagonistic environment, really.
Which
So
he
later
realizes.
well, he does, but again, he doesn't fully articulate that in a way where he sort of actually apologizes properly and tries to explain what he was doing. Now, you could argue that the audience doesn't need that, but part of me sort of, it may have been nice given this, because I think Sonny comes out maybe a little bit too cleanly with a few too many things implied rather than actually taking the level of responsibility that one would kind of want from our leading character. That's a very minor gripe, though, because like I say, you could say it's implied, even though we don't necessarily have a huge amount of turning points that we see or don't say it in dialogue. So it's sort of rare to argue, I want something to be a little bit more overt, a little bit more explicit, a little bit less subtextual, particularly in a film like this, where there's so much that's already, explicit and verbalized and whatnot. But that was my particular instinct there. I was like, just a little more.
Well, I don't have much more to say. I'm keen to see how it does at the Oscars. I did really enjoy this movie. If for some reason you've gotten to the end of this podcast, you haven't seen this movie because you thought, F1's not my thing, shrug that off and go watch this movie. This movie is fantastic. It is a spectacle.
Yeah, it's a good time. It's a good time.
Have you got anything else for us, Jim, or are we moving on?
I was saying, if you want to tell the good people of the interwebs where they can find other good times regarding films, why don't you do so now?
Yeah, there are lots of podcasts out there that aren't ours. So you can definitely... No. You can definitely support other podcasts, but you should definitely support our podcast by going to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. We have a massive back catalogue now. We have watched many, many movies and spoke about them just like we have done in this podcast. Hey, if you're a huge F1 fan, I'd love to hear what in this movie did work from an F1 angle and what in this movie didn't work from an F1 angle. I'd love to hear your passionate and expert responses to that question. If you want to listen to us audioly, you can do so on Spotify and iTunes.
Audioly is now my favorite word. Audioly. If you want to listen to us audioly, audioly.
Audioly. If you are on Spotify or iTunes, please... like us, please follow us, please leave a comment. That helps other people discover us as well. If you want to follow us on any sort of social media, you can do so at Jim_and_Ben at Instagram and Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures on TikTok. Oof, wow. I lost my way partway through that one, but I dug it back out.
I didn't help by making fun of the way you were talking about it. So,
and Jim, that's why I appreciate you. So,
look,
what are we doing next week? Podcast.
This movie, like I said, it was pure 90s in so many ways. Okay, it reminded me of that the 90s kind of do an original idea sort of thing, but also an idea that we've seen a million times before. Make both of those things true at once. Don't base it on existing IP. And I went, what's one of the most 90s examples of that we haven't yet watched? And I ended up with a film that, look, I don't even necessarily love this film.
Awesome. But great start.
It's going to be a fun one to talk about together because it's got some weird stuff in it. So we're going to head to 1999 and we are going to watch Entrapment with Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Not in a million years. Not in a million years would I have thought Jim's picking Entrapment. That's wild.
Have you seen this movie?
I think so. I haven't committed it to memory if I have.
I
feel like it's something I've seen.
It's going to be a good time. I'm already looking forward to it. So join us for 1999's Entrapment. Bye.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a good one.